Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another review. I decided to do something different this time, add some more content to my channel other than movie reviews, the weekly WWE review, and, other random stuff like 5 episodes in and book reviews. I decided, maybe I should start doing some more TV reviews because last year or so, most of the stuff I've been doing is like 5 episodes in, Fawlty Towers and Breaking Bad, so I decided that slowly I'm going to go back and watch a show that I really enjoy and like do season by season reviews of it. I mean, I tried it once, but then I stopped for some reason. And of course, the show I'm going to start with is a show that while I didn't start watching it for the first couple seasons, I watched the latter half of the show. And that, of course, is the show House MD. Of course, the MD part isn't really prominent. It's just mostly called House, but I add the MD to differentiate it so they don't, some hardcore fans of film and all that don't mistakenly think I'm talking about the movie House. Anyway, the show was created by David Shore. One of the producers is Bryan Singer, and he also directed the pilot episode of the show. And the show stars, throughout its history, Hugh Laurie, Lisa Edelstein, Omar Epps, Robert Sean Leonard, Jennifer Morrison, Jesse Spencer, Peter Jacobson, Cal Penn, Olivia Wilde, Amber Tamblyn, Odette Annabelle, and Charlene Yee. But those last handful of ones don't show up until later seasons. A couple of them season 4, and then the rest of them subsequent seasons. Now, of course, obviously, I'm going to start with season 1, which aired from November 16th, 2004 to May 24th, 2005 on Fox. And I can tell you, over the last couple of years, this was the only excuse I had to watch anything on Fox, because now I don't really think I ever watch it unless it's on the gym and the news thing is on in the gym, and it's something that I'm like, okay, what are they spinning this time? But other than that, I don't usually watch it unless, Simpsons is on and I'm skipping through channels to find something to watch. That's the only time I ever watch it. Anyway, another actress who was in this season that I didn't mention in the roll call, because those are all the main character actors, the actors who play the main characters throughout the show, is actress Celia Ward, who plays the character of Stacy, who is main character Gregory House's ex-girlfriend, but she doesn't show up to the last few episodes, and she becomes a recurring character in the next season, but I'll talk about that when I get to the next season. Anyway, the season had about 22 episodes, and most of our main cast is in all of them. Cameron's only not in one of them by this count, and that's episode 18, and that's mainly because of a story arc involving her. Our recurring cast, we got Chi McBride as Edward Vogler, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. He is the one character in this season, and the one little subplot in this entire show that I would really do without, but I'll talk about that. And we got, like I said, Celia Ward, Kenneth Choi as Dr. Lim in 2 episodes. Ron Perkins is Dr. Ron Simpson in 2 episodes. And that's about all. The rest of them is just 1 episode. Then we got guest cast, Jennifer Stone, Roxanne Hart. I'm just going to skim through them. Ann Dode. And Carmen Electra in a brief one, but her cameo is kind of funny. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about every episode. I'm probably just going to spend this talking about a couple episodes and then, do the trivia. Because I think I'm going to just talk about the trivia on IMDb and then know its rating in this episode. And then whenever I get down to the next season reviews, I can spend it more talking about the actual show. But anyway. The pilot episode is called Everybody Lies. And it introduces the characters very well. It shows House, shows, he's an excellent doctor, but he has 3 problems. His attitude towards people, which kind of, connects with his whole bedside manner. His leg, which connects to his 3rd problem, which is his drug addiction, Vicodin. Now, throughout the entire show, they mostly, especially in this first season where it's established, they explore his addiction, and he at one point even admits he has an addiction, but says he has no problem with it because it doesn't rule him, which of course, as we find out in that episode, and then of course in later episodes and later seasons, it does kind of control him, especially once we get to season 5, which, a couple seasons away. We're introduced to his 3 fellows, Chase, Foreman, and Cameron, and each of their personalities, and they work well off one another. Then of course we are introduced to House's buddy, Dr. Wilson of oncology, and we get a little bit of their back and forth. And then of course Lisa Cuddy, the dean of medicine, she has a good back and forth with House. It's very witty, and it's more so throughout the first season. You can tell there's a little sexual tension there, but it's a little bit more established as the show goes on, which is why in the end I'm actually glad they got together for a little bit in one of the last seasons. But I'll get to that when I get to the later seasons. And the pilot episode does what a pilot episode is supposed to do, establishes everything, and then of course it continues on from there. And of course they bring in a lot of interesting diseases. Like the second episode deals with a 16-year-old with night terrors, and then episode 6 deals with the blood clot that travels from the leg to the heart, and then more stuff goes from there. I'm not going to discuss every single one of them, but they're all interesting. And episode 4 involves an outbreak in the maternity ward, which is very interesting considering that at first they think it's just House inventing a case because he's bored, but then we find out it actually is true, and they have to actually figure out what's wrong. Let's see, then DNR, probably one of my favorite episodes of this season, involves a jazz musician named John Henry Giles, played by Harry J. Lennox. He collapses during a recording session, and they're trying to figure it out, but of course House has to deal with the fact that he has a do not resuscitate order, and he ignores it, and then it goes from there, and eventually they heal the guy and make him better than he was before. But it's interesting considering it's a musician here, and as we find out, House is also a musician. He doesn't obviously play professionally, but he does, and of course that's part of one of the aspects of Hugh Laurie's real life that was put into the character, and that Hugh Laurie is a musician. Then there's Detox, which shows a little bit more of the back and forth between Cuddy and House, where they make a bet about the fact that House cannot go off Vicodin for, I believe it's a week, and of course she says if he wins he'll get a month off clinic duties, and he agrees. And of course with this we see just how much the Vicodin actually, I wouldn't say helps him, but it numbs his pain, but that's because of how many years he's been taking it, about probably 4.5 to 5 years, ever since his accident with his leg, which is mentioned around this time, but they don't go into specifics. But this is where we really see just how much the Vicodin does control him a little bit, which, like I said, comes back in later episodes and later seasons. And of course we get to probably my favorite episode of this season, and one of my favorite episodes of the entire show, 3 stories, where House has to fill in for a doctor because he works at a teaching hospital, so there's students in and out all the time, and he has to fill in for one doctor, and he tells them each 3 cases, all involving a patient's leg in one form or another. And of course one of the stories turns out to be his, and we find out the whole story involving his thigh muscle and the infarction that was diagnosed too late, and the fact that his ex-girlfriend Stacy, who was his medical proxy, went behind his back and went with the middle ground that Dr. Cuddy had recommended, and that was, instead of amputating the leg or doing the thing the House wanted, which was bypassing the clot, they removed the dead tissue, which basically leaves House in pain, and probably end up saving him a lot more surgery, because we don't know what would have happened, but it basically was the catalyst for him and Stacy breaking up eventually, which is kind of sad. And of course we get to see a little bit more into House's past than we had before, and it's like, okay, they really, some of his other doctors really didn't think highly of him if they thought he was having drug-seeking behavior when he was saying his leg was hurting, and as a doctor he just grabbed a painkiller and treated it. But with how we see him now, you're like, okay, we could probably see why they would think he has drug-seeking behavior, possibly because he's not getting a high from solving a case, so he's going to try to get a high from something else, which is one of the ways he's kind of based off Sherlock Holmes. I won't say kind of, because if you know anything about the show, you know that House is based off the character of Sherlock Holmes. How they, the way Holmes treats criminal cases is how House treats, medical cases, and of course they both are drug addicts. Holmes with cocaine in between cases, and House with his Vicodin. I guess that the in between cases part is what they were trying to insinuate with the whole drug-seeking behavior thing, or at least that's my view on it. Then of course, Watson, Wilson, close friends, help him occasionally. And of course, there's other minor references like the last name of the guy that shoots House in the next season is Moriarty, and then of course they mention a woman in this season with the last name Adler, or a woman. I think it was a later season or this one, I forget which one, but a woman with the last name Adler. Anyone knows anything about Sherlock Holmes? Irene Adler. Anyway, and then of course, 3 stories could have been the season finale, but the season finale is Honeymoon, which deals with Stacy and her husband, and of course her wanting House to treat him. It's an interesting episode, and it ties into the storyline involving Stacy in the next season. If there's one part of this season that I really do not like, it is the 5-episode arc from episode 14. I'm just counting to episode 18 that involves the character of Edward Vogler. I always am tempted whenever I rewatch a show to skip these episodes because I'm not a fan of them, but I always end up watching them because I like the subplots involving each episode. And there's also a few funny moments, like when House in the 4th episode just basically gives Vogler the finger and actually says the truth about the product he wants him to talk about. Now, if I remember right, Fox basically told Shore and Singer that they had to add an antagonist for House to go against, which is why I'm guessing Vogler is as big as an ass as he is, though in a different manner. So for that, it's like, okay, they were kind of shoestringed into it, which is part of the reason I don't like it, but also just the way they have him, like he wants to fully treat the hospital like it's a business. Like, I know the hospital has to make money, but you should not treat the medical industry 100% like a business. I mean, part of that mentality is part of the reason that the American health system is in the state it's in right now. And I'm not just talking about with hospitals, I'm talking about with insurance and co-pays and all that. It's all, adds up to one thing, but with Vogler's mindset, it's like, oh, no wonder it's in the way it is. But one thing I like about him, the character, I could say at least, is the fact that he wants to fight diseases. He's just going about it the wrong way. I mean, just because he doesn't like House's manner, he wants to get rid of him, even though he is a great doctor who saves lives. It's like, really? You're going to just let your personal opinion on a doctor with tenure who saves lives just because he doesn't wear the coat, doesn't act like a typical doctor, but probably saves a lot more lives than a lot of them, or at least as much, but does it differently just because of his manner? You're gonna fire him? Now, I know in real life House probably would have gotten fired a long time ago, but still, the point is, in the show he's an excellent doctor, and it's like you're gonna get rid of him just because you don't like him. And then the whole thing with him trying to get rid of House's tenure in the last episode he's in, he has to do the petty thing and try to get rid of Wilson and Cuddy first before doing it. It's like, really, doctors, you're gonna let him push you around? And he basically, that's the episode where he mostly throws his money in their faces. He does it a couple times in other episodes, but it's like, really, you're gonna let him do that? It's like, they basically made him the personification of big business and why it should not interfere in the medical industry, at least to the extent like where it can basically push decisions on the medical industry that they don't want to do. Like, for example, here, getting rid of a doctor they like. Real life would be something like denying pre-existing conditions, which I think is stupid, which, not perfect, but I think it's one of the few good things the Affordable Health Care Act has done. Another thing is, because of my state, I can have health insurance now. Let's see, and just, I'll say this though, at least the actor they got who played Vogler did a good job. It's just like a good heel wrestler. If he can make you hate him, he's doing his job right. With Vogler, he's the antagonist. He makes you hate him, so he's doing his job right. It's just, he just came off as unnecessary. I'm going to get to it when I get to season 3, but the guy who plays the cop in season 3, he did his job just as well, but I think that came across way more naturally. Though, you're going to get my full thoughts on that. I don't think the cop would have been able to do that in real life, but again, maybe it's a difference in the system in Jersey and the system here, but you'll get my full-on thoughts on that when I get into season 3. Anyway, in conclusion, this is an excellent season, good way to introduce all the characters, naturally progressing story. I like a lot of the subplots, like Cameron quitting because of Vogler and then coming back, showing a little bit of attraction between Cameron and House, which I really wish it would have been nice if they followed through with that just a little bit more, like maybe have them at least have a one-night stand, but it is what it is. All the back and forth between all the minor characters, the revelation of why House is the way he is, and then that episode that could segue nicely into season 2. Good way. to start the show. In conclusion, I would give season 1 of House a 4 out of 5 stars. And if you haven't watched the show, you've been hesitant, like, I don't like medical dramas and all that, and you have Netflix, which is how I've been rewatching the show, it definitely comes with my recommendation. Now time for the IMDb stuff. On IMDb, the show as a whole has an 8.9. And this is some of the trivia. During Hugh Laurie's audition, producer David Shore told how Bryan Singer, one of the executive producers, said, "See, this is what I want, an American guy." Singer was completely unaware of the fact that Hugh Laurie is British. And the funny thing is, if you watch some of the stuff Hugh Laurie has done where he is actually playing someone who is British, and you listen to his actual speaking voice, and then listen to his house voice, you're like, dang, he could do an American accent pretty well. Of course, I always have the voice in that mind because of the Hamlet sketch he was in with Rowan Atkinson of Mr. Bean and Blackadder fame. Hugh Laurie's own father was a doctor, and he feels a twinge of guilt at being paid more to become a fake version of my own father, in his own words. True, but it shows just how much of a good actor he is. Though other characters occasionally insinuate that Dr. Chase is a bit dim, he actually comes up with more correct diagnosis, than any other supporting character over the course of the series. In several episodes, House is shown at home, and his address is 221B, a tribute to Sherlock Holmes' famous London address, 221B Baker Street. Oh, this is funny. Dr. Gregory House was based on Sherlock Holmes, as I said, but Holmes in turn was based on a doctor that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle knew while studying medicine, Dr. Joseph Bell, whose specialty was diagnosis. Kind of a little funny circle there. You use a doctor as a basis for a detective, and you use said detective as a basis for a doctor. When ER doctors admit patients who have a known history of drug use or addiction, it is often noted in their patient charts using the acronym HOUSE for history of use. Kind of funny if you think about it. In 2009, the British tabloid The Daily Express reported that Hugh Laurie was starting to suffer physical injury from years of walking with his character's pronounced limp. I don't know if that's true or not, but I could sort of see why that would be. I mean, just from filming one movie, in American Hustle, Christian Bale had a problem with his back. I think he herniated a disc or something because of his character's slouch. But then again, of course, look at all the physical transformations he's done for his craft, so his would probably be a little bit more obvious to happen than that one, or would probably be able to more easily happen over a short period of filming than Hugh Laurie's leg over a long period of filming. On Inside the Actor Studio, Hugh Laurie admitted that when he first read the script for House, he believed that the character of Wilson was the lead. He couldn't believe that a man such as House could be the star of the show. You can see why. Dr. Robert Chase is an intensivist, a doctor who specializes in intensive care. The specialty is new and uncommon in the United States, but well established in Australia, where the character is from. Makes sense? One of the movie posters on Wilson's office is Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, where Orson Welles plays a detective with a gimp leg who solves crime purely on his intuition. Clearly one of the influences for House. Robert Sean Leonard was the first actor to be cast. Although the diagnostic medicine team deal with all types of diseases, House and his colleagues hold titles in various specialties. Dr. Foreman is a neurologist, Dr. Cameron is an immunologist, allergist, I already mentioned what Dr. Chase is. Later on, Dr. Taub is a plastic surgeon, Dr. Kuttner specializes in sports medicine, Dr. Hadley, aka 13, is an internist. As for House, he is double certified in infectious diseases and I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing this. Nephrology. I wonder what that means. Hugh Laurie auditioned for the part of Dr. House via video short in a hotel bathroom in Namibia, where he was shooting Flight of the Phoenix. It was the only place with enough light, the actor claimed. Dr. House is a polyglot. He knows English, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, Hindi, and Mandarin, which is standard Chinese. The aerial shots of the hospital are actually of the back of Frist Student Center at Princeton University. Uh, Dr. House's most famous line, "Everybody lies," was in fact used by another doctor about a year and a half before the pilot episode in the medical show, the sitcom Scrubs. Okay, yeah. The whole thing about Vogler, David Shore was hesitant about the idea but ended up creating the character. One of the promotional posters features Hugh Laurie wrapped in two snakes with a pair of wings behind him, a recreation of the Greek caduceus symbol. Foreign fans might be confused by this because the correct symbol is the rod of Asclepius the healer, a similar symbol having only one coiled snake and no wings. However, within the U.S., the caduceus is as commonly used as the more correct rod of Asclepius. Excuse me if I'm butchering these names, as its use was popularized around the turn of the century. As the caduceus is actually the symbol of merchants and thieves, its use has long been a point of controversy and satirical humor within the U.S. medical community. In Dead Poets Society, Robert Sean Leonard played a character under pressure from his father to become a doctor, but whose passion was to become an actor. 3 out of 6 original cast members are left-handed: Cuddy, Foreman, and Wilson. That's very interesting. Let's see. Many of the actors that have been featured on House MD have also been featured on the show Psych. I'm not going to go into the whole list. Lisa Edelstein and Peter Jacobson both played in the movie As Good as It Gets, starring Helen Hunt and Jack Nicholson, at the same scene, sitting next to each other years before the show even premiered. Kind of funny if you think about it. I wonder if they had a little discussion when when Jacobson started on the show. It's like, oh, you're on this show too. Oh, blah blah. Or if she had a hand in him getting cast, who knows? This is for a later season. The recurring character of Lucas Douglas was created to establish a spin-off series starring Michael Weston, but the producers decided not to make the series, which is kind of sad. I think that series would have been interesting, even if it only lasted a season. Let's see. In his office, Dr. Wilson has posters from the movie Robert Redford's Ordinary People from 1980 and the classic films Touch of Evil and Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. The show takes place in the Mercer County area of New Jersey. In the opening credits, there are shots of various locations around the area of Princeton, Trenton, West Windsor, and Plainsboro, including Princeton University. The motorcycle that Dr. House owns is a 2005 Honda CBR 1000 RR Repsol replica. This is a little funny. Omar Epps' character, Eric Foreman, shares a name with the lead character on Fox's That 70s Show, played by Topher Grace. However, Grace's character is named Foreman, and the similar names are purely coincidental. Dennis Leary, David Cross, Rob Morrow, and Patrick Dempsey were considered for the part of Dr. House. Kyle MacLachlan auditioned for the role of Dr. House, and he describes it as one of the worst auditions of his life. Wonder if that's because of how they put pressure on him or because of his performance. Several episodes were shot on location at a gentleman's club in LA, the Foreplay Gentleman's Club. Oh, this is a little minor continuity thing. In Season 1, Dr. Chase mentions that he is 26, but in Season 2, he tells a patient he is 30. I'm sure 4 years did not go by between Season 1 and 2. I guess either he got it wrong or he lied about his age to make himself sound a little older or younger. Jesse Spencer and Jennifer Morrison became engaged in December of 2006. This was at roughly the same time they were shooting the first episodes in which their characters, Dr. Chase and Dr. Cameron, began a romantic relationship. More on that in another season. I already mentioned that. I'll talk about that in another one, and that's about it to talk about. Like I said, Season 1 gets a 4 out of 5, and if you haven't watched it, it comes with my recommendation. If you have Netflix, no excuse not to watch it other than you don't want to.